Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are diving into an absolute geopolitical earthquake, the brand new 14-point agreement signed between the United States and Iran. We're going to break down exactly what was signed, the literal billions of dollars at stake, and the global fallout, just sticking straight to the facts and the raw text of the deal itself. Let's get right into it.
So, we have to start with this pretty striking quote. Literally moments after the U.S. president officially signed the agreement, Iran's chief negotiator actually referred to the deal as, quote, a record of America's failure. I mean, wow, right? That is a jarring statement. It's a massive contrast to the U.S. administration's stated goal of ending the conflict and finding a diplomatic path forward. It immediately makes you wonder, what on earth is actually in this document that has the Iranian delegation declaring victory?
Here's our roadmap for This Explainer. We're going to look inside the 14-point agreement, unpack the $300 billion economic plan, compare this deal to the 2015 deal, check out the domestic political divide, and finally, wrap up with the global and strategic implications.
All right, Section 1, inside the 14-point agreement, where we'll be analyzing points 4 and 8.
If you look at the specific language of Point 4, it explicitly commits the United States to removing its forces from the, quote, proximity of Iran within a very strict 30-day window after the final deal is done.
Naturally, this raises an immediate, massive question for us. What does proximity actually mean here? You know, the U.S. doesn't have ground troops inside Iran, but there are nearly 24 American military sites scattered all across the Middle East. Does this imply a total American military retreat from the region? Interestingly, when reporters pressed the U.S. president for details on when the military would leave the Gulf, he admitted it was a, quote, good question, but noted they hadn't really thought of it yet, kind of suggesting they'd just wait and see how things go. For analysts, this creates some profound ambiguity around America's military footprint moving forward.
Moving further down the document, Point 8 addresses the absolute elephant in the room, nuclear weapons. It states that Iran, quote, reaffirms that it shall not procure or develop nuclear weapons. At first glance, you might think, wow, a definitive win for non-proliferation. But the devil is really in one specific word here, reaffirms.
By definition, to reaffirm is just to state a fact strongly again. Analysts are quick to point out that this isn't actually a new concession. Iranian officials have categorically stated for decades now that they aren't pursuing a nuclear bomb. For instance, the president of Iran literally stated at the UN last year, quote, I hereby declare once more before this assembly that Iran has never sought and will never seek to build a nuclear bomb. Now, whether or not international observers actually believe them, well, that's the core of this whole historic tension. But the fact that Iran is putting it on paper here, that's really just a repetition of their standard talking point, not some novel change in policy.
Okay, on to Section 2, the $300 billion economic plan. Let's unpack Point 6. Reading directly from the text here, the United States undertakes to develop a mutually agreed plan with at least $300 billion for the reconstruction and economic development of Iran. This is huge, especially considering previous vows from the administration that absolutely no money would exchange hands in any way, shape, or form. This clause essentially guarantees a massive financial influx into Iran. Just to help put the sheer scale of that number into perspective, Iran's entire GDP last year was $371 billion. So this $300 billion reconstruction plan, it effectively doubles the size of their entire national economy overnight. It is a total game changer. But wait, that's not the whole financial picture. On top of the reconstruction plan, reports are indicating that this agreement could unfreeze more than $100 billion in Iranian assets. These are funds that have been locked up in foreign banks under international sanctions for years.
Which brings us to Section 3, comparing deals, 2015 versus now, for a little historical perspective.
You might remember the 2015 Obama-era deal unfroze an estimated $50 billion in Iranian assets. Now, that was a move heavily criticized by the current administration for years. Yet if we look at this new deal, it potentially unfreezes double that amount, $100 billion, and stacks that staggering $300 billion development plan right on top of it.
What makes this incredibly fascinating is the pure political whiplash. Back in 2015, the Obama administration defended unfreezing assets by arguing, hey, it was Iran's own money, not U.S. taxpayer dollars. Now we're seeing President Trump use the exact same argument to defend this new deal. He stated, quote, it's not our money, it's their money, and we froze it. I guess we're going to have to give it back. Now let's look at Section 4, the domestic political divide, specifically the Republican split. This whole situation has created a pretty massive schism within the Republican Party. On one side, the hawks are furious. They're calling it an American surrender that risks taxpayer dollars and strengthens an adversary. But on the other hand, the diplomats in the party are quietly breathing a sigh of relief. They realize that avoiding an international depression and keeping gas prices low at the pump is absolutely crucial right before the midterm elections. Finally, Section 5, Global and Strategic Implications. We're talking shifting alliances and the strategic fallout.
Analysts are highlighting some massive strategic shifts here. There are serious talks about Iran regaining control over the critical Straits of Hormuz. And think about America's global allies, countries who endured real economic hardship right alongside the U.S. to enforce those sanctions. They are now terrified of a potential American pullout from the Middle East. Meanwhile, adversaries are openly questioning American resolve. And tragically, for Iranian opposition protesters, who were previously encouraged by the U.S. to rise up, they now find themselves completely abandoned as the U.S. publicly accepts the current regime.
So, we leave you with this to think about. Considering the unprecedented financial windfalls, the incredibly ambiguous military retreats, and the absolute whiplash experienced by allies and politicians alike, how will this 14-point agreement permanently alter America's global stature moving forward? It's a question that is absolutely going to define the geopolitical map for decades to come. Thank you so much for joining us for this explainer, and we will see you next time.